Now, I know what you're thinking. Barbecue ribs in the oven? There's no way they are as good as smoked ribs. But well, here's the thing. You are absolutely right. You simply cannot replicate that smokiness in the oven. But my strategy is to pack in a ton of flavor into these oven baked ribs so we don't miss the smoky flavor. And that's the trick. Let's layer in some flavors, and the result, it's going to be some amazing ribs that's going to make anyone happy. Let me show you how. Let's start by prepping these baby back ribs. Now, as you know, I always like to say to take your favorite kitchen recipe and cook it outside, but today we are flipping the script. I'm taking my favorite barbecue rib recipe and, well, bringing it inside. My first tip is to treat these ribs as a clean canvas and start layering in some flavors. Layering more and more as we cook them. Pork really absorbs flavor, so let's really pack it in. Now, the first level, I'm going to use some hot sauce as a binder. The purpose of a binder is functional. It's going to allow the rub or seasoning to stick to the meat and create a nice, tasty crust. But these ribs are already moist and you will have no problem holding the rub as is. But using the hot sauce is going to give it a very subtle background heat. Now, if you don't like spice, substitute the hot sauce with some Worcestershire sauce. Now, once I give these ribs a nice layer of hot sauce, I'm going to add a seasoning. You can use any pork seasoning. For this video, I decided to pick something up at my local grocery store versus making something from scratch. I'd never used this seasoning, but checking in the ingredients in the back, it's got everything I need in a rub. So let's season both sides. The great thing about cooking is being able to experiment. Don't use the same seasoning and sauce all the time. Buy something or try something new from time to time. Since I'm not smoking these outside, I decided to use some liquid smoke. I know, how controversial of me, right? It's been a long time since I used liquid smoke. I was never a fan because the smoke flavor always tasted, well, fake. I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's just kind of a generic smoke taste. And it really doesn't duplicate the smoke flavor you can get on the grill. But we're going to be all about layering in flavors with this cook, so let's give it another shot with these ribs. It really doesn't need much though. Just a few drops. Actually, I should have had this before I seasoned, but well, confession time, I completely forgot to add this until after I add the seasoning. Once completely seasoned, it's ready to cook. You could put this in a pan with a wire rack. Now, since the air is circulating underneath them, it really helps to cook them more evenly and faster. I'm going to be using the slow and sear dripping griddle. The stainless steel grate is actually going to make it easier to clean. Lining the bottom with aluminum foil, it's going to make it even extra easier. Let's place these in the oven set to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to cook these for about 2 hours before I go to the second part of the cook. Now 2 hours later, let's remove. These are not tender, but I'm going to speed up the process by wrapping them in foil. This is the perfect opportunity to layer in more flavor. Welcome to level 2. I'm going to wrap these ribs with some additional seasoning and placing in our ribs meat side down. I like using juice here, but I went with some Coke. This is going to really allow the ribs to baste, get tender quickly, and continue to pack in the flavor. I'm going to wrap these ribs nice and tight. Removing any air pockets is a must. This way they don't steam. And then I'm going to place them back in the oven. An hour later, let's remove them from the wrap. These are nice and tender. There's some nice bone pullback. To test for tenderness, poke them with a toothpick. It should slide right in like room temperature butter. Time for some more flavor. Let's welcome these ribs to level 3. Our final layer of flavor, some sauce. Use your favorite barbecue sauce. I'm going to give it a very different flavor profile and give it a little Asian zing with a sauce called, well, Asian Zing. See what I did there? Now, one thing to keep in mind with barbecue sauce is that it can be very, very overwhelming. It sometimes hides all of the flavors you built up. I personally like a dry rub, especially when grilling them outside. But I understand that the majority of people are all about that sauce. So I'm giving it a nice coat, which I feel it's going to need that extra boost of flavor because we're cooking these in the oven. Let's place back in the oven. We want the sauce to tack up nicely. If you feel adventurous, use a broiler to add a little char. Char equals flavor. but be very, very careful not to overdo it because it's really going to introduce a very bitter taste. 30 minutes later, these ribs are done. We'll want to let these rest for about 15 minutes. Now once rested, let's slice into them. I like flipping them to the bone side because it's easier to cut through the bones if we actually see the bones. Getting a closer look at these ribs, you can't help but admire the color. Ooh, excited about these right here. Let's do it. The juiciness and the aroma coming out of these ribs, it's going to make anyone's mouth water. I love me some smoked ribs, but I definitely wouldn't turn these away if you serve them to me. I'm always asked if using a marinade makes for a better tasting rib. Well, the answer is actually going to surprise you. Check out this next video, and I'm going to be using a marinade you probably already have in your kitchen.